What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the Trank. Today I'm going to be turning this cool little vase out of a Banksia nut. It is from the fruit of a Banksia tree, which is in Australia, is where they come from. So there were some mistakes in here. It was my first time turning one, but it still turned out pretty cool looking, so I decided to go ahead and share it, but I'm going to try some more of these in the future. So let's go ahead and dive in. Okay, so the first step was to get somewhat of a flat reference face so that I could actually get this on the lathe somehow, because it's got a really odd profile to it straight out of the package. And so I just cut a piece off of the table saw there, keeping it clamped against the fence, and then I could mount it on centers to start forming a tenon to put it in the chuck. I really don't like turning much between centers. I find that it's pretty unstable, I guess, for the most part, and so I really just use this as a method of putting tenons or recesses so that I can get it into a chuck of some sort. So here I'm going to be using a 2-inch chuck, so I just cut the tenon there, pretty simple. You can see that the nut is part fuzz almost and part shell, and so it's not the most stable tenon, but it's the best you're going to get with something like this. So then I could use my carbide circular cutter to start roughing the profile out. And again, I've been practicing using traditional tools, but on something like this where it's gonna, really beat up that edge, I think this is a perfect instance to use carbide tools. I keep the live center on there just to help with stability while I'm doing the roughing. And as usual, this roughing process takes a while because you got to take pretty small passes each time. And so I just slowly peck away at it. You can see all that fuzz in there. That's what I was talking about. It's a really kind of an interesting thing, this Banksia nut. I don't really know what that fuzz is, but it's pretty easy to turn overall. It does make a huge mess, a lot of dust. So make sure you wear a dust mask. And, other than that, it turns real easy. It breaks. It's pretty brittle, so as it starts coming into round here, I start bringing it into the diameter I want. Now, a big aspect of turning these I found is that fuzz can really penetrate pretty deep sometimes, and so to actually get to the nut itself, you got to really turn off quite a bit of the material, which is kind of a bummer because it really limits the size that you can get out of these. So I'm going to be using a small glass test tube in order to hold, whatever you're going to be using this vase for. And so I start drilling it out with a Forstner bit. You can see here I've got a pretty thin wall there at the tip of the neck, which is kind of my mistake for bringing it in a little too thin before drilling here. But the downside to using a Forstner bit is that you don't have much throw with them. And so I ended up getting a 3/4 inch standard split point bit, which has a lot more drill depth to it, and that worked out really well for drilling out this main hole. I just wanted to get it so that there'd be just a small reveal of the test tube sticking out the top of the neck. And you can see to do this, I sometimes had to start the lathe with the drill already in the hole and then actually start to back the tailstock in. But that worked out just fine, and you can see the test tube fits nicely. Again, pretty thin wall there at the neck. I would leave that a little thicker, or the ideal thing would be to use a thinner test tube, which I'll definitely do down the road when I turn more of these. So finally I could start shaping the profile, and I'm kind of going for a typical, almost like a volumetric flask type design. So it's going to have a long neck and a slightly spherical base to it. So I start out just by drawing out that neck quite a bit. You can see something I was fighting at the base there is that the fuzz was still, even at this diameter, the fuzz was still there, so I really had to keep taking off more and more material and making the overall vase smaller to get past that fuzz. You can see there's a big patch there near the chuck. So I just kept turning down the diameter and then slowly started, you can see I've got a pencil margin in there to help with turning this spherical base, which I found is a really good tip for doing spheres, because otherwise you just keep trying to correct the sphere until you essentially take away all the material. So it's really good to put that, that slight gap there so that you kind of have a good reference. And I leave about a 3/4 inch tenon there still attached, and then here you can see, unfortunately, because of that thin wall, the neck actually snapped off the tip. And this is more of a result if you saw the kind of eccentricity of the turning there. That's because the whole thing flew off the chuck off camera, and so I had to remount it. And of course that throws off the center alignment, and so the neck especially was slightly eccentric, and that I think caused that shatter. I decided to stick with it instead of tossing it and just pretend that it was kind of a live edge-ish design. And it honestly doesn't look terrible. And I've gotten mixed reviews from it. Some people said it's noticeable that it's just a broken vase, and some say it kind of looks natural. So like I said, this was more of an experimental design more than anything. So I apply some sanding sealer here before doing a friction polish. That's pretty important because there's lots of little pores and gaps obviously in this nut. And so that really helps at least give you a little bit more surface area for the finish. I use a Mylan's friction polish, so I just do a couple coats of that and then use the heat from the turning to kind of rub it, to use the friction to get it into that nice polish, which you can see it gives it a nice little bit of a shine there. And then here in a second you'll see the result of my second big mistake, which is misjudging the depth that I had drilled that hole. So my plan here was to just part it carefully at the bottom, and we'll see how that goes here. And so if you've done any turning, you've probably run into that classic situation where you're parting and it flies off. This time though is unfortunately due to, again, I had misjudged how deep I had drilled that hole, and so I actually was basically turning it into nothing there, so it flew off. And so this made the second big mistake, and I decided to again kind of just roll with it, and I ended up just sawing a little plug to seal that at the bottom so that I could still use this as a vase. But this was an experimental project. I definitely want to turn more of these because I think they have potential to be very cool looking, and they're pretty, just an interesting piece to turn. So I'll do more of them, but I just wanted to share this because it was kind of just, it turned out neat looking and it was kind of fun to do. So I just use a bit of CA glue to put that plug in place. Other than that, with the test tube, you can actually put some water in there and put some little, some sort of little flowers or something in there, which is kind of neat. And it turned out not too bad looking, but definitely room for improvement in the future. So that will do it for this quick project. Alright guys, that's going to do it for this video. This was just a super simple kind of getting back into the swing of things sort of project. I've got a lot more bigger projects, some fine furniture projects planned, and I'm really excited for that. Finally going to be clearing off my workbench and using it for traditional hand tool work, and I'm really excited for what this summer is going to bring. So be sure you subscribe to my channel, guys. Follow me on my Instagram. I keep a lot more updates there of some current things I'm working on. So thanks for watching, and we'll see you on the next video.